to be with you all on this beautiful, rainy, beautiful night. Welcome. Welcome to Satsang. We'll start, as always, with a question that has come in advance from our audience joining us from online via this gift of the internet. And then we'll open it up to any questions that anyone here has. Sandeep, yeah? Yeah, aaja mere paas. Aaja mere paas. Is it really important to go to the temple every day to connect with God? If God is everywhere, why do we have to go to the temple? And this is asked by someone who has given their name as God's child. One sec, sorry. So God is everywhere, absolutely. Wherever you are. Not only is God everywhere, but there is actually nothing but God. So wherever you are, there is God, because there's no place that is not God. And yet, why temple then? Temple because connecting with God everywhere is not easy. It's like, how many of you lived in a hostel or a dorm in university or school? Only a few of you. Okay. So, yeah, done. Sandeep, yeah? Jo maine kaha hai na? When we want to study for an exam, and we're, as a young person in junior high, high school, but living off in a hostel, or we are at university living in a dorm, what do you learn? Where's the right place to study? Is it in your dorm room, in your hostel room? Never works. Now, the material is the same. The books are the same, the notes are the same, the information is the same. Why is it that when you study in your dorm room, you don't actually learn it, but when you study in the library, you do? It shouldn't make any sense, right? You are the same, your brain is the same, the material is the same. Why should it matter? It matters because of the energetic environment. So in the same way that studying in your dorm room or your hostel room, with lots of loud music coming either from your roommates or other people in the hallway, and I mean, I remember my dorm room, undergrad at Stanford. It was crazy. First of all, there were 3 of us in the room. I had 2 roommates, Everybody's on a different schedule, and this was in the days before cell phones, but we had a landline phone. Somebody was always on the landline phone, always talking. The door was always opening, closing, people coming in, going out, coming in, going out. There was so much noise. Music in the hallway, people playing music, people yelling, whatever it was. I remember sitting in the dorm room trying to study, reading it again, it wouldn't go inside. And then I discovered the library. And it was so quiet and so beautiful. And I remember learning that early in my freshman year, that if I actually wanted to study, I needed to go to the library. If I wanted to pretend I was studying and just kind of hang out in the room and let people come in and out and socialize and chat and, get pulled away to go for coffee, then I should stay in the dorm room. But if I really wanted to study, only to do it in the library. In the same way, God is everywhere, accessible everywhere. As I said, nothing but God. The issue is not about God, the issue is about our mind. In the same way, the issue in your studies is not about the subject, it's not math or science or history, it's your mind. Are you able to read it, understand it, learn it, remember it? And for that, you need the mind to be in a certain state. When we go into a temple, our mind comes into a state of, oh, now I'm going to a holy place. Maybe on the way into the temple, we were talking on the phone to somebody about something regarding work, or maybe we were gossiping, or maybe we were having a fight with our family member in the car, yelling in the car. But the moment you get into the temple, like automatically, the mind just connects to God. That's why we need the temple. It's not that there's God more in the temple. It's that you are more able to connect with God. You're more able to leave the things of the world aside and connect with God when you're in the temple. So, if you live alone, if you've created a home-like temple, no problem. But if you live like most people live, where home is the place where your mind is filled with all of the tasks that you have left to do, all of the family members who you have to take care of or look after or you're fighting with. Home is the place where you're distracted by what's in the fridge or what's in the cabinet, what's on the computer. Get yourself out. Come to the temple so that the mind can actually connect. So that's why. Any questions that... Yes, of course. Please come up to the mic. Thank you. Can you speak directly into the microphone so we could... Thank you so much. Do one thing, I'm so sorry, एक सेकंड, एक काम करो भैया, दिक्कत क्या हो गया, आपने माइक इसी तरह से लगाया कि वो मेरे को देख नहीं सकते, नहीं सुनो, भैया सुनो, माइक इस तरफ कर दो, नहीं, हाँ, put, thank you, yeah, you can, नहीं, no, वो दिखाएंगे आपको, सीधा कर दो, बात यह है लोग इसलिए can hear you perfectly. इश्यू यह है संजय, बात यह है जब माइक ऐसे लगाते हैं कि कैमरा एकदम पीछे, लोग इसलिए उसमें बात नहीं करते क्योंकि वो मेरे को देखने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, लेकिन एकदम सामने वो कैमरा एकदम बीच में है, तो थोड़ा सा साइड कर दीजिएगा ना, फिर देख भी लेंगे. Perfect.
So this question has been bothering me quite some time.
Sure.
And I've been studying some of the scriptural literature, basically from ancient Western traditions, and pretty much one theme that everybody agrees upon is that, let's say Hinduism philosophy, like Brahma, for example, right, or the God or creator or whatever. Said and unknowable to a certain degree as not a physical form, which is what the human experience wants to see and imagine. So the challenge is that you can't see it, you can't understand it. Then, well, let me just kind of step back. So what people are saying that God wants to do or create.
I'm so sorry, can you say that again?
The Brahman, let's say, was the Indian religion.
Yes, of course.
Brahman wants to know itself.
Right.
Because it is perfect, alone,
Yeah.
Oneness.
Of course.
So oneness cannot understand itself.
Right.
Quality. So it's created that, right?
Okay.
But at the same time, if the Brahman created that because it has a desire of some kind, that hey, I want to know myself, so created that. That desire implies lack in some form. But Brahman cannot have lack.
Okay. Okay.
So is it dichotomy of paradox?
Okay. Good question. Okay. So let me just simplify that for those of you sitting here. It's a good question. इनकी माइक को बंद कर दीजिए ना भैया. धन्यवाद. Then we don't get the echo in the microphones. Perfect. So he spoke about Brahman, which is the eternal reality. Brahman can be defined poorly because words don't work very well, but we speak about an infinite reality, supreme reality, Sat Chit Anand, which means existence or truth, consciousness, bliss, that is the quality of Brahman. Sometimes people also speak about Brahman as the universe. Not exactly true, but unless we're going to get into semantic squabbles, it works. And he said that his understanding was that Brahman had created the universe, that this is what he understood philosophy to say, that Brahman had created the universe in order to experience himself, itself, and that's why this duality was created. And then he said very logically, well, if Brahman is infinite, where is there a lack? A desire implies a lack. And if what we're looking at is infinite reality, how can infinite reality have some kind of a lack that leads to a desire that would lead to the creation? Hannah, that was the question, right? Okay. So there's two aspects here. One aspect is Brahman, or sometimes we say Brahm, which is that infinite reality, supreme reality, existence, consciousness, bliss, unbroken, Nothing but the divine. Then we have what we speak of as the Trinity of the divine. We were talking about this the other night as well in response to a different question. That has Brahma, different than Brahman. Brahma, the creator, the creative aspect of the universe. Vishnu, the aspect that sustains. And Shiva, or Mahesh, the aspect that dissolves or destroys. The creation of the universe, as told in our scriptures, and again, it's much deeper, it's much more complex. There's many, many more strands of this than there's time to get into now. But in short, in simpleness, the Brahma who created is not the same as the Brahman of the infinite existence. Because then you wouldn't even have Vishnu and Shiva. The simple fact that we have three different aspects. Now, of course, they're not even separate. When you have an infinite divine, what does God do? Three things. Creation happens, sustenance happens, destruction happens. We are born, we are sustained for some time, then we die. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. The tree has green leaves. The green leaves turn brown and orange and red and they dry. They fall. That which falls becomes the soil out of which new creation comes. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, it's cyclical. According to my understanding of Advaita Vedanta, this infinite reality doesn't actually do anything other than exist. It is. The creation is happening by what we speak of as Bhagawan, Brahma Bhagawan, Vishnu Bhagawan, Shankar Bhagawan. That's an element of the divine who we pray to, who is in a specific aspect, a specific manifestation, a specific embodiment of characteristics of the divine. Now, the entire Leela, this act of creation in which we are in human bodies, we forget that we are divine, we go through our life in pain and struggle and yearning and desire and resentment and jealousy and lust and greed and attachment and expectation and grief and joy. This whole drama takes place in what is referred to by the Advaita Vedantists as Maya. It is not a quality of Brahman. It is a quality of Maya. Why? Why does the divine create? Well, it's a great question. It's, in a way, the perennial question. We have, of course, scriptural stories that tell us stories about Bhagawan Vishnu lying in the celestial ocean, about Bhagawan Brahma creating. We have our stories. And in the stories, there are what you could consider micro answers. Meaning, in the context of the story, there is a reason. But when you go outside the context of the story, The reason doesn't always hold a lot of water, as you've pointed out so beautifully. The only explanation that I've ever heard for why this entire creation has been created is what you spoke about, but there's a critical piece missing. It's not about desire, it's not about lack. It's about union and it's about love. When you are one, unbroken, absolutely borderless, boundaryless, infinite existence, there's no love, because in order to have love, you need a lover, you need a beloved. There's actually an act of loving. I love that which is seen to be outside of me. On a superficial level, God, I love chocolate ice cream. On a deeper level, love our parents, love our children, love our spouses. On an even deeper level, we love the creation because we love the Creator, we love God. As we sing in Arati, Sabse Unchi Prem Sagai, the highest form of love is love for God. We practice Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion, the path of love. Bhagavan Krishna tells us in the Gita why Bhakti Yoga, why devotion is so important. But paramount to a practice of devotion is an experience of separation. I cannot be devoted to myself that is formless, nameless existence. That's a real hard one to work up the energy for. Because then, of course, the question is, well, who's devoted? Who loves? If all I am is infinite consciousness, who's doing the loving? Who's the subject? Right? We need a subject and an object. If that which I love is myself, well, who's the subject? Who's doing the loving? Right? It makes your head spin a little bit. It only works in separation. If I am separate from you, I can love you. If I am, and I can experience a great oneness and togetherness and melting and merging in love, but ultimately, we have to be two in order for there to be an energy that brings us together in love. When I put my arms around a tree and I feel the universe pulsating in the tree, and I melt and I merge into that experience, it's powerful because 5 seconds earlier, I was the hiker and the tree was the tree and we were separate. And that coming together in union is the bliss. In order to do puja, in order to sing kirtan, in order to love God, I have to feel on some level separate from God. Not in a negative way. I can know in my heart that we are one. But I have to be prepared to be able, when I close my eyes, to picture Bhagavan Krishna, to feel the energy of Bhagavan Krishna to whom I am singing, as separate from myself. Otherwise, who's singing to whom? Doesn't make any sense. Singing to myself, well then who's singing? Right? If I'm the one being sung to, who's singing? And who's listening? Who's writing the lyrics? Who's remembering the lyrics? So it only works in separation, okay? Navato bhumika banaya. That's the foundation. The explanation that I have heard that makes the most sense to me is that God wanted to experience the love and the union, the ecstatic union that comes when two become one. But in order to do that, one has to become two first. There have to be two created in order for the two to come back to one. Here's an easy way of thinking about this. If you're in relationship, romantic relationship, chances are what you will have noticed, if you're very honest with yourself, is that at some point, and maybe it's your husband or wife, maybe it was when you were younger, a boyfriend or a girlfriend, but you'll find that sometimes consciously or even unconsciously, when things are going fine, like there's no problem in the relationship, but we get a little bored almost, again, unconsciously, longing for that experience of reunion. And so what do? We create a little bit of a fight. And again, a lot of times it happens unconsciously. My best friend and I, growing up in high school, we used to joke about how we loved the drama. We were addicted to passion, addicted to this kind of making up again, like the fights and then the making up. And we would tell each other and laugh about it. But as I grew up, that was when we were young, as I grew up, I realized how common this is and how many of us do this unnecessarily. But why? Because when you fight and then you make up, that process of making up feels really good. And if the relationship was starting to feel a bit stale, even good, wonderful, married 30 years, whatever it may be, but that energy, if it doesn't feel like it's there, by stirring up the pot a little bit with a little bit of conflict, we can go from being one, from being united, to being two. Here we are in opposite ends of the room, yelling at each other, or two different rooms in the house, slamming doors, I don't want to see you. Now we've gone from one to two. And in the process of coming from two back to one as we make up, there is a strength, there is a power, there is a passion, there is an energy that makes it worthwhile to keep having these otherwise nonsense fights. That yearning to experience the reunion, the two becoming one, is, from what I've heard, the reason that God has created two. Because if you've ever been in love, really in love, powerfully in love, that experience of two becoming one is so extraordinary and so exquisite that I guess even if you're God, you want to have that experience. Not because there's lack, but because the experience is so beautiful and so exquisite that it's like the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae. The ice cream sundae was already perfect. You didn't actually need the little cherry on top. But they always put it there because it's nice. It adds a little something. So on top of that which was already infinite, God wanted to have this cherry on top of the experience of two become one. Yeah, beautiful. Sure. Yes.
So, you
Can you speak into the microphone?
Sorry, yeah. So would you say that we're living in two-dimensional life? One is the physical reality in which we live and experience the human experience, so to speak. And the other side is the real who you are, right? The consciousness of Atma.
Okay.
And how do you reconcile? Because are we kind of jumping back and forth between the two states, assuming that you're in this restriction?
Yes, great. Are we living in two different realities at the same time, bouncing back and forth? It's not two different realities. It's one reality on different layers, different levels of existence. One existence, but different levels. The easiest way to think about this for me is the ocean and the waves. If you imagine that the ocean were infinite, rather than having, the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, land masses in the middle, if you imagine we have an infinite ocean, then in that ocean you have waves. Are the waves in the ocean two different realities? No. Not at all. The wave truth is a level of truth. Meaning, does it exist? Sure, absolutely. You could measure it. You could say that's an 8-foot wave, a 4-foot wave. You could measure the velocity. You could say that wave is traveling at X kilometers per hour, don't surf it, it'll wipe you out. We could give you all of the factual information about the wave. It absolutely exists. It has a size, it has a shape, it has a volume of water, it has a velocity. It has a history. If you were looking from a satellite, you could see where did the wave form, exactly where in the ocean did it start, where did it start to grow, where did it crash, where did it come down. And yet, even at its peak of waveness, at the highest point, it's 8 foot or 3 foot or 20 foot waveness, the highest truth of that wave is water. But it never stops being water in order to become a wave. It's not water, wave, water, wave, water, wave. It's the wave. The wave is there. And yet, if the wave were a meditator, or the wave were studying deep philosophy, the wave would say, I am water. I am water. I am infinite ocean. And that would be true. The highest truth of that wave is infinite ocean. Water. Similarly for us, do we have a story? Are you here in this material world? Absolutely. You have a height, you have a weight, you have a circumference, right? Our doctors check this all the time. Your circumference is expanding a little bit. We got to do something about that, right? It's there, it exists. Your circumference expands too much, you're going to have a heart attack and die. It's true. We could look at the history. Where you were born, where did you come out? We can follow it. And yet, throughout this entire journey of you in this physical dimension, the highest truth is divinity, consciousness, Satchidanand, Brahman, God, whatever word you use. That's your highest truth. Spirit, soul, light, whatever word you use, they're all speaking to that same aspect. That's your highest truth. Are you here in a human body? Absolutely. The only thing that goes back and forth is our awareness. Our truth doesn't change. We're not going from human to spirit to human to spirit any more than the wave goes from being wave to water to wave to water. But what happens is our awareness shifts. We're looking outward, we see objects. We're looking inward, we see soul. We look in this direction, we're looking at our interaction in the physical world. We see ourselves in separation. My height, my weight, my history, my story, my clothes, my bank account. We close our eyes and we go inward. There's no height or weight or bank account when you go inward. There's nothing. So your awareness vacillates, and this is spiritual practice, is to anchor yourself more and more in the inner awareness, even while the body is in the world. Body is doing its thing. You're waking, you're walking, you're working, you're serving. You're doing its thing. But your awareness is remembering soul, spirit, consciousness. Like the wave is not saying, wow, look at how big I am. Did you see how I crushed that surfer? The wave understands, I'm just water. Just water. It's not about me. This is just one momentary wave on an infinite ocean. Today I'm the 8-foot wave. Yesterday I was the 2-inch wave. For months before that, I wasn't a wave at all. I was just water. Before that, one time, I was a 30-foot wave. Right? It just, same way. We take different bodies, different incarnations, different roles and stories. But the truth of who we are doesn't change. And that's the aspect of anchoring your awareness in that truth. Beautiful. Yes.
Can I ask in Hindi?
Sure.
क्या जमीन पृथ्वी पर कुछ ऐसे स्थान हैं जैसे मैं उज्जैन से हूँ जहाँ महाराज जी सेक्रेटरी के पास देवासी जगह जहाँ पर पूजा साधना करने से जल्दी फल प्राप्त होता है. This is in continuation with your first question.
Yes.
तो यदि ऐसा है तो वो क्यों है? क्या मैं इंदौर या दिल्ली या बम्बई में रहकर भी अपनी आध्यात्मिक प्रगति कर सकता हूँ या मुझे भी हरिद्वार ऋषिकेश या हिमालय जाना चाहिए?
Great question. So going back to our first question about accessing God in the temple versus anywhere. He said, what about these places that are considered sacred and holy places? You know, we're told these sacred holy places, Rishikesh, Haridwar, Ujjain, you know, these places are holy places. Whether they're holy places because we have Ma Ganga here, or holy because there's a beautiful divine story of God being there, or whatever it may be. Do I have to go to those places to further my spiritual practice, or is it possible anywhere? It's possible anywhere, absolutely. And yet, there are certain places on earth that for a variety of reasons are very, very powerful spiritually. Absolutely, undoubtedly. And where spiritual progress happens a lot more quickly. going to those places can make your spiritual practice easier. It can give you a bit of a catalyst. And this is something that, every religion has. Every religion has holy pilgrimage places. And it's believed that by going on a holy pilgrimage, whether to Badrinath, Kedarnath, whether to Jerusalem, whether to Mecca, wherever your religion, whether to Amritsar in the Golden Temple, Hemkund Sahib, whatever your religion may be, wherever it sends you, it's believed that by being in that place, you will actually energetically have a jump start on your spiritual practice, that the ability to access the truth and the divine in those places is stronger. And that's absolutely true. I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in so many lives. It's what our scriptures tell us. It's what all of the different religions tell us. And God is everywhere. So, Bodh Gaya became famous after the Buddha got enlightened. He sat down under a tree. That place became holy because he got enlightened. It wasn't that he went on pilgrimage to a holy place. He sat under this beautiful sacred tree. Now the tree is a pilgrimage place. Can it be done? Of course it can be done. But human life, our minds, our egos, our ignorance, the society we live in, the culture we live in, it's full of so many challenges to our spiritual practice that I feel like, why not give yourself the very best head start that you can? Whatever shortcuts, whatever special ways there might be to get closer to God, to free the mind, why not? Can you do it on a subway in New York City? Of course you can. But if it's going to be faster and easier sitting on the banks of Ganga in Rishikesh, why not? Of course. Yes. Yes, you.
Thank you. So first of all, I would like to thank you for these beautiful days that I'm here, and I've been witnessing all the beauty and all the joy of coming here, taking part in the ceremonies, and it was amazing. And all the work that the ashram does about helping people, helping women, helping disabled people, and things like that. And of course, I will share it with my friends. And things like that. And what I found out through those talkings, that people have struggling with trust in spiritual places, spiritual leaders, ashrams, and I can see their point, because when we look back at it, like for the last 50 years, we have many, many examples where so-called sacred places were participating with the, some different kind of things and good things.
I'm so sorry, I missed that last part of what you said.
I mean, we can see through the history of the last 50 years that some places that claim to be sacred, enlightened, things like that, or people who claim to be so, were, taking part with some bad things. Like
Yes, I understand what you mean. Of course, I understand it. Yes, yes,
things like
yes.
that. So first of all, why do you think it happens? Because I highly doubt that from the very beginning it was the plan. I think something happened to these places after.
Sure.
And also how people can, build the trust to the place and kind of make themselves safe about not getting to some, place that is fraud, because nowadays spirituality becomes so much
Okay. So, spiritual places that are supposed to be dedicated to spirituality and sacredness and love. He said, you know, if you look at the past 50 years, there have been so many examples of spiritual places or spiritual leaders who ended up taking part in or creating misery, whether it's abuse, whether it's harm, whatever it may be, that what we see in many of these places or people is the opposite of what we expect to see. And he said, why do you think that is? What happens to them? He said, surely they don't begin like that. So first of all, from what I've seen in the almost 30 years that I've been walking a spiritual life and playing the role of a spiritual leader amongst other leaders in a spiritual place, going to other spiritual places, being with other people from other spiritual places, is almost all of them really are actually dedicated, exactly as we expect they should be, to spirituality, to purity, to service. There are absolutely some where we hear these stories. The problem is that because those stories, or those scandals rather, become big news, we think it happens more frequently than it does. This is a psychological tenet that's spoken about a lot in psychology about this. It's what's called the availability bias. And it means the more we see something, the more we think that it happens every time. So you see, for example, an article about an airplane crash. So we think, oh my God, airplanes are dangerous. Car crashes don't go in the newspaper. Cars are much more dangerous than airplanes. Many, many more people die every year in car crashes than airplane crashes. But if you asked most people which is more dangerous, nobody has a phobia of getting in a car. Lots of people have phobias of getting on airplanes. Because plane crashes are big news. In the same way, an ashram, a church, a monastery, a spiritual organization of some kind gets, embroiled in the midst of some huge scandal around abuse or theft or something else awful. It's major news. And everybody's mind goes, oh, those religious people, those spiritual people, those spiritual places. And it's actually why I feel so deeply that people who live in these places, even people who, for example, are just yoga teachers, let's say you don't live in an ashram, you don't live in a monastery, you live abroad, you're just a yoga teacher. Nonetheless, you represent the Dharma. And every time there's a scandal about some yoga teacher, people automatically start to think, oh, those yoga people. Now, what we know is, actually statistically, it's very few. It's few and far between. But because it is always big news when it happens, it hurts people's faith a lot, as it should, understandably. But you have to realize that if you look at the last 50 years and you count up the number of those sorts of scandals, or those sorts of people, leaders or institutions, who were acting out of integrity, it's a tiny number compared to those who are acting in great integrity. So we have to just also be sure not to get swept away with just, what we see online, because, ashram feeds hungry people. It's not news. Ashram teaches meditation, not news. Yoga teacher teaches yoga, not news. Ashram is found with, basements full of gold. It's news. So you hear about that, and you don't hear the rest. And even if you hear one of these stories every 3, 4, 5 years, nonetheless, it percolates in our mind into this distrust. That being said, even though it is very rare, thankfully, why does it happen? I agree with you fully, by the way. I don't think anybody gets into it rotten from the beginning. I don't think anybody purposely decides, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a spiritual community. Then we're going to rob people of all their money. Or then we're going to abuse the children. Or I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend years training to become a yoga teacher. So then I can, take sexual advantage of my students. I don't think anybody ever plans in that way. I think what happens is people go into this with a pure heart, pure intentions. But the truth is, power is a very difficult thing to deal with. And if you have not done a lot of sadhana, a lot of meditation, and suddenly you are surrounded by people who worship you, who adore you, it would be very hard to deal with that. And I think that that is one of the main causes for where we see downfalls, is you get leaders who may have gone in with a pure heart, they had a good idea, but they're not people who have really dedicated themselves to deep personal spiritual work. I mean, you look at Pujya Swamiji, for example, who, for me, I feel very spoiled in some ways, because not only is he my guru, but he was the first spiritual master I met. And he's so incredibly pure that none of anything of the human world, physical form, money, power, nothing touches him. He's not interested. I've said many times that, if naked women literally appeared right in front of him, he wouldn't even notice. And if he did, it would only be because it was winter time, and he would ring the bell that he has, and one of his guys would come and he'd say, Acha, bring them some shawls, they must be cold. In the same time in winter time, he'll notice if somebody's not wearing socks, and he'll send one of the boys in to bring them some socks. Okay, your feet must be cold. But he has spent his entire life in sadhana. I mean, even if we remove the belief that a lot of us have that he actually incarnated like this, he spent decades and decades in intense spiritual practices. It purifies the mind to such an extent that those temptations, whether it's a temptation around sex, whether it's a temptation around money, whether it's a temptation around power or violence or whatever it may be, if you can get in there at such a young age, I mean, he left his home at 8. If you can get in there at such a young age when the brain, the mind, the personality is not even formed yet. That's why traditionally, in Indian tradition, kids were sent off to the Gurukul. At a young age, they were sent away from their homes, sent to live with the Guru, train them. It wasn't just about reading scriptures. It was about get them at this young age. Train their minds so that no matter how much they attain in their lives, they don't get corrupted by it. They don't get swept up by it. And I think what happens in a lot of places is you get leaders who, through a variety of reasons, even just pure basic charisma, end up with lots of followers who are very dedicated. Power corrupts. And if you haven't done that work, I think it would be very, very, very easy to fall prey to temptation. But it's important not to get jaded by the few and far between. You know, I mean, every once in a while, doctors rape patients on the operating table. Every once in a while, teachers molest their students in class. But that doesn't mean that we don't send our kids to school, or that we suddenly have a negative view of the institution of education, or that we don't go for an operation we need because we read a newspaper article 5 years ago about, you know, a doctor who did this. We understand that whatever field you're in, ultimately we're all humans. And whether we're humans wearing robes of religious leaders, or we're humans as doctors, or we're humans as teachers, or we're humans in any field, there are going to be, every once in a while, people who live out of integrity. But those people should not be enough to harm our faith in the institution that they happen to walk into. Just because a doctor rapes a patient on an operating table doesn't mean that the field of medicine is corrupt. A teacher molesting students in the classroom doesn't mean that the field of education is corrupt. It means that tragically, when you have human beings who have not done their work, who are not looking at themselves, who are not meditating. You know, one of my favorite stories, I'll end with this, is a story about Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who had the ashram just down here that they now call the Beatles ashram, but actually it was Maharishiji's ashram that the Beatles came and stayed at. And Pujya Swamiji was with Maharishiji one day when Maharishiji's assistant came in and told him that one of their key core people had just stolen tons of money and run away. It might have been their accountant. I mean, it was somebody who had access to all of their funds and had stolen tons of money and had run off. Now you think, my God, you're the head of an institution. Your trusted person has just betrayed you, stolen from you, embezzled all of this money, ran away. Anybody would be angry. But Maharishiji was very calm. Very, very calm. Didn't get worked up. He said very sadly, he said, he must have not been meditating. And I love that story. I love it, A, about Maharishiji, because just how calm he was able to stay. But B, I love it because what it means is the idea that anyone would think about embezzling huge sums of money, that you would think about doing fraud, it means you've gone off the track somewhere. And whether you are a spiritual leader or in a spiritual institution or just a secretary in an office, whatever role you play in the world, when you go off track, when you don't meditate, when you don't practice mindfulness, we lose our way. And we get swept up by temptation, by lust, by greed, by desire, by anger, by ego, by ignorance. These are the 10 heads of Ravan, right? The 10-headed demon. And when you stop cultivating that power and presence of Ram, means Dharma, means righteousness in you. Well, if not all 10 heads get you, at least one of them is going to get you. I mean, there's not one person sitting in this room who hasn't been, I mean, feel free to raise your hand if you haven't been, but I doubt it's true, who hasn't been at some point in their life filled with lust, greed, anger, jealousy. I mean, this is part and parcel of the human condition. The question is, what do you do then? When the mind is full of that, what do you do with your words, with your hands, with your legs, with your actions? That's the difference. The nature of humanity is we will have these thoughts come. But then what do? Do you act on them? Do you get swept up by them? Or do you just notice it? And return your awareness to the light of the soul, the light of spirit, the light of awareness within you. And if you're not practicing that, then it's very likely that at some point you're going to get swept up by it. And if you're in a position of power, and if you've got power over other people's lives, then the damage is much, much greater. The possibility for good is much greater, and the possibility for damage is much greater. Yeah. Great. We're gonna bring satsang to a close. I am leaving tomorrow evening, but prior to satsang. And I will be out actually for the next couple of weeks. I'll be in London, then I'll be in the US, then I'll be back in India. So we'll start satsang again, either the 6th or the 7th of October. Because when I'm back in India, I'm actually not coming straight to Rishikesh. I have to be in other parts of India for a few days. So I'll be back in Rishikesh on hopefully the 6th, but it could be the 7th of October. So our beautiful Seva team will get flyers posted, in different parts of the ashram and the receptions. We'll get it up on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and online and all of that to let you know. So much love to you all.